The final chapter of Charlie Kirk. Overview passage. On September 10, 2025, a wave of shock swept across the United States when Charlie Kirk, the outspoken conservative activist and founder of Turning Point USA, was fatally shot during a live event at Utah Valley University. The attack, carried out before a stunned audience, ended the life of a figure who had spent more than a decade shaping the voice of young conservatism in America. As news spread, emotions erupted nationwide, grief and disbelief from supporters who saw Kirk as a fearless leader, and solemn respect even from rivals who had fiercely debated him. Candlelight vigils appeared on campuses where he once spoke, social media filled with tributes, prayers, and sharp debates about his legacy. Beyond America, the world watched with alarm and sorrow as global headlines framed his death as a sign of deepening political violence and polarization in the United States. For millions, the loss of Charlie Kirk marked not only the end of a life, but the silencing of a powerful and polarizing voice, leaving a generation of followers mourning their leader and a nation grappling with what his absence now means. Below is a clear, sourced update on the latest status of the Charlie Kirk shooting case, what's known about the shooter, charges, evidence, and the likely court steps and procedures coming next, based on public statements from prosecutors, law enforcement, and reporting from major outlets. Current status: what prosecutors and law enforcement have announced. Suspect identified and in custody. Authorities have identified 22-year-old Tyler James Robinson as the suspect in the fatal shooting of Charlie Kirk at Utah Valley University on September 10, 2025. Robinson turned himself in after a multi-day manhunt and is being held in the Utah County Jail. Formal charges filed. Utah County prosecutors filed a criminal information charging Robinson with multiple counts, including aggravated murder, felony discharge of a firearm, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and committing a violent offense in the presence of a child. Prosecutors have said the case will include multiple aggravating factors. Prosecutors intend to seek the death penalty. Utah County Attorney Jeff Gray announced his office will seek capital punishment in this case and has filed a notice of intent to pursue the death penalty. That decision was publicly stated at the charges announcement. Evidence prosecutors described publicly. Officials have described several pieces of evidence they say link Robinson to the crime. Alleged text messages and other communications, including alleged admissions, DNA found on the trigger of the rifle recovered near the scene, video and trace evidence from the rooftop, and messages suggesting premeditation. Prosecutors have also described alleged attempts to conceal evidence and communications with a roommate. Preliminary court appearances. Robinson has appeared virtually for initial court hearings, including a brief arraignment or first appearance. He is being held without bail. Local reporting and court documents indicate additional pre-trial events are scheduled. Reports cite a waiver or bail-related hearing scheduled for September 29, 2025, and ongoing virtual status appearances. What happens next, procedurally? What to expect in the near term? Below are the typical steps for a major criminal prosecution in Utah, and specific steps the prosecution has signaled it will take in this capital case. Timing and precise procedures will depend on filings, defense actions, and judicial orders, but these are the likely next phases. Pre-trial scheduling and defense appointment. Because Robinson was declared indigent at initial hearings, a public defender or court-appointed capital defense team will be assigned if the defendant cannot retain private counsel. The court will set a schedule of pre-trial dates, status conferences, discovery deadlines. Reported during early hearings. Capital case procedures triggered by notice to seek the death penalty. When prosecutors give formal notice they will seek the death penalty, additional statutory safeguards apply. This often includes appointment of experienced capital case counsel for the defense, expanded discovery obligations, and early scrutiny of admissible evidence. The defense may request competency evaluations and expert work, forensic testing of DNA, ballistics, digital forensics. Court may order mental health or competency assessments. Officials have already reported forensic links, DNA on the rifle trigger, that prosecution will need to authenticate at trial. Attempted resolutions versus trial. The case may proceed to a full criminal trial, guilt phase, and, if convicted of aggravated murder, a separate sentencing phase, where prosecutors will argue aggravating factors to justify the death penalty, and the defense will present mitigating evidence to avoid capital punishment. Alternatively, the defense could explore plea options, but in capital-eligible cases, pleas are complex and subject to court procedures. Pre-trial publicity and venue motions. Given extensive media attention, the defense may file motions to change venue or seek other remedies to ensure an impartial jury. Prosecutors have acknowledged concerns about pre-trial publicity. Courts will weigh whether the case should stay in Utah County or be moved. Trial and sentencing. If the case goes to trial and results in conviction on aggravated murder with aggravators that support capital punishment, Utah law permits a death sentence. If convicted but not sentenced to death, the defendant would face a lengthy prison term. Either outcome will proceed through standard sentencing and, if applicable, automatic appeals in capital cases. Short timeline, based on public reporting and court filings. September 10, 2025, shooting at Utah Valley University. Charlie Kirk killed. Federal Bureau of Investigation. September 11 through 13, 2025, manhunt. Suspect identified. Suspect turns himself in after encouragement from family or retired deputy. September 16 through 17, 2025, prosecutors announce formal charges, detail evidence, text messages, DNA, and file notice to seek the death penalty. Initial virtual court appearances held, suspect remanded without bail. Reports cite a September 29 hearing for waiver bail matters. What investigators and the public are watching most closely. Strength and authenticity of forensic evidence, DNA, ballistics, video, and digital evidence, texts, Discord or social posts. Prosecutors have already publicly described these items as central to their case. Whether the defense will file competency or insanity defenses and the timing of any such evaluations. Venue and jury selection strategy given intense publicity. A change of venue motion is common in high-profile cases. Decisions about capital prosecution, including whether the state will move forward to trial seeking death or pursue a plea that avoids capital sentencing. A consequential prosecutorial choice that will shape the timeline. Here's the summary of how the world has reacted to Charlie Kirk's death beyond America, showing what people and leaders abroad said, what emotions were stirred, and what made his death resonate internationally. Global reactions and expressions of grief. Middle East and Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar, and other Israeli officials quickly expressed strong sympathy and tribute. They described Kirk as a lion-hearted friend of Israel, a fearless warrior for truth and freedom, and someone who represented Judeo-Christian values that unite Israel and America. Netanyahu noted he had spoken to him just weeks before Kirk's death and had invited him to Israel. The planned visit obviously could not happen, which added to the sorrow. Europe, Hungary, UK, France, etc. Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orbán posted on social media, "We lost a true defender of faith and freedom," and blamed the hate-mongering left for contributing to the climate that he sees led to Kirk's death. In the UK, Prime Minister Keir Starmer called the death heartbreaking for a young family, and emphasized that political violence can have no justification. French conservative figures and others also condemned the killing, framing it as a threat to free speech and democratic debate. Latin America, South America. Argentine President Javier Milei, a libertarian populist figure, also paid tribute, calling the assassination a deep wound for democracy. He emphasized Kirk's role in defending what Milei describes as Western freedoms. South Africa and Afrikaner community. Conservative and Afrikaner interest groups in South Africa expressed grief and held vigils, for example outside the U.S. Embassy in Pretoria. They saw Kirk's death as a signal about conservative values worldwide being under threat. Activists and global allies. Figures outside government spoke with personal sorrow. Zaid F. Sardar Sadi, a human rights activist from Bangladesh, said the loss was both personal and global. Kirk had worked with him on free speech, national security, and democratic issues. He called it a cowardly act that must be a global wake-up call. Others noted that while Kirk was more famous inside conservative circles, his social media presence, speaking tours abroad, Japan, South Korea, etc., and ideological affinity with other right, populist movements made him well known globally. Public shock and digital reaction. On social media internationally, including among political commentators abroad, people expressed shock, fear, and sadness. Some compared the attack to other political violence. Others used his death to warn about the fragility of free speech, especially for outspoken conservative voices. What made Kirk's death feel particularly resonant outside the U.S.? Several factors contributed to the strong global reaction. International visibility. Kirk wasn't just speaking in U.S. campuses. He had traveled abroad recently, met with student activists and conservative groups internationally, Japan, South Korea, etc., which built a global following. Ideological alignment. Many conservative, nationalist, religious right movements around the world view issues like free speech, cultural identity, Christian values, immigration, and opposition to progressive social policies similarly to Kirk's positions. For those groups, his death seemed like a blow in their broader battles. Polarization and fear of political violence. The shock was not just over Kirk's death, but what it represents in an era of increasing political polarization globally. Many saw it as evidence that the kind of political conflict, verbal hostility, ideological dividing lines that already exist are stepping across into violence. Symbol of free speech. Many tributes emphasized his role in defending what they call free speech, especially for conservative or dissenting voices. For many, his death became a symbol that speaking out can carry real risk in polarized political climates.